Hello, this is Victor with QManager here. In this tutorial, we will learn how to create building sites profiles, enter subsite and unit information, define the applicable construction contracts and corresponding tasks. To make the best of this lesson, it is necessary that your application is already set up and that you have at least several contacts in different roles entered in your QManager database. If you have followed through our previous tutorials, you're good to go, and we may directly proceed to My Sites. Let us get started. This section is quite similar to the Contacts directory. On the left-hand side, the list of your sites will appear. You will be able to sort and search through it using the filters above. On the right-hand side, the details and controls for the selected site will be displayed. Currently, we have no sites, and we are looking at the blank template for creating a new site. For the purposes of this tutorial, we may imagine that we will be working on a construction site for a commercial space called Grand City Mall in Berlin, Germany. We may begin by entering the required information. The first couple of fields are used to formally identify the site. The site number accepts only digits. But on the site code field, you may enter also letters. The site name may be anything you choose, but let's stick to our imaginary scenario and name it Grand City Mall. For the address of the site, we have two options. We may either type in the information manually, or we may use the geolocation features of our device to pick up the address and coordinates of our current location. This is particularly useful when you are entering the information while being on site. Let us give the second option a try by clicking on the geolocation icon. Note that the use of this feature requires an active internet connection. Depending on the speed of your connection and the current GPS signal strength, the time taken to pinpoint your location may vary. Once our location has been determined, all we need to do is click on the Add button, and we will be automatically returned to our previous view with the necessary data already filled in, including the exact GPS coordinates. At your discretion, you may then edit any of the data fields if you believe that changes are necessary. Finally, we may select the site owner from the drop-down menu. Here, only members of our contact list with the role of the site owners will be listed. Let us select one and create our site entry by clicking on the Save button. Our site now appears selected in the list on the left. So far we have covered the very basic setup of a site entry, but there is a lot more here that we can do. For example, we may define additional subsites and/or specific building units such as apartments or individual retail spaces. For a large project, such as the commercial mall that we have introduced for the tutorial, it makes sense to define subsites. So let's go ahead and create a few now by clicking on the Subsite button at the top right of the screen. As you see, the interface is very similar to the one we had in the Sites dialog, with the subsite list on the left and the current item details on the right. One important difference is that this time, in the top left corner, we see the current site that we are working on, in this case, the Grand City Mall. In the Details screen, we have almost the same fields, and for your convenience, the address fields are automatically filled in with the data from the site. You would rarely have to edit the address lines unless your subsites are part of a very large or spread out project, such as an industrial or a housing complex. Let us now give this unit an ID and a descriptive name. For example, parking lot. We then click on Save, and we now have our first subsite created. By pressing the plus sign at the top left, we get a new blank template to create another subsite. To save time, I will now fast forward the video to right after I'm done adding an administration and a commercial space subsites. Alright, we are now finished adding subsites and we may go back to our site overview screen. Next, we will briefly look at the specifics of creating units. The process is very similar to creating sites and subsites, but with a few minor differences. We now see the familiar layout with a blank template for creating a unit. The address lines are again already filled in, but there is a bit more information here that we need to provide. If this building unit belongs to one of the subsites that we created, we may assign it to the subsite from the drop-down menu. In this case, let us assign it to the commercial spaces. Next, we need to specify on which floor the unit is located, and finally give it a name. Optionally, we may also specify the date on which this unit was signed into operation, and we can pick the unit's owner and/or tenant. For the purposes of this tutorial, we will just choose a tenant from our contact list. We then click Save, and we have our first unit created. Last, but not of least importance, we need to define the applicable construction contracts that we are overseeing for this site. We can do this by clicking on the Contract icon in the upper right corner. Again, in the top left, we see the current site that we are working on, and below it, the list of all contracts. Currently, of course, there are none. So let us create one using the fields on the right-hand side. First, we need to input the contract basics. The contract value to be paid to the contractor in your local currency, then the contract number or ID, the date on which it starts, and the date on which the work should be completed. Then, we also need to select the responsible contractor. Here, we may again choose from the entries in our contacts database, but only those with a contractor role will be available. We then click on Save, which creates the contact entry. We may then proceed to specify the tasks governed by this contract. To do this, we need to click on the plus button at the bottom right. This opens up an additional dialog view where we may define a specific task subject to this contract. For example, masonry. In many countries, the different types of tasks have universal codes. In Germany, for example, masonry is labeled with 012. If such codes are not applicable for your country, simply type in a 4-digit number in the code field and then click Save. If we want to add yet another task, we will see that the task that we had already entered is now available from the drop-down menu. The task descriptions and their codes will be available also for any other contract within the application, making them faster and easier to work with. Our site now has everything it needs. We have defined subsites, individual units, and of course the relevant contracts and the companies responsible for them. We are now all set to make site inspections and document deficiencies. We will learn how to do this step by step in our next tutorial. As always, thanks for watching and have a superb day.